Welcome back to the channel. Today we're tackling a project that might seem a little radical, a little minimalist. We're taking this trusty, but maybe slightly cluttered, geared bike and stripping it down to its essentials. We're going single speed. Why go single speed, you ask? Well, maybe you're tired of fiddly gears, constant adjustments, or the added weight. Maybe you crave a simpler, more direct connection to your ride. Or maybe, like me, you just like the clean look. Whatever your reasons, trust me, converting your geared bike to a single speed can be a seriously rewarding experience. Now, this isn't a super complicated surgery, but we'll need a few tools and some key parts. So, grab your Allen keys, wrenches, chain breaker, and maybe a cup of coffee. Let's get wrenching. First things first, let's liberate our bike from its shifting mechanisms. I'll first remove this chain, then we'll move on to the rear derailleur. Undo that cable clamp, unbolt the derailleur hanger, and say goodbye. Next up, the cassette. Remove the rear wheel, grab your chain whip and cassette lock ring tool, remove the cassette off the free hub body. Now for the front. Disconnect the front derailleur cable and unbolt the derailleur. Now then, let's tackle those shifters. My shifters are combined with the brake levers, so I'll temporarily disconnect the brakes. Next, let's remove these grips. Followed by the shifters. Loosen the clamps and then slide them right off the handlebars. Don't mind all these cables, I'll save these for later. Alright. With the shifters gone, let's talk about our crankset. Now, take a close look at this one. Notice anything that may prevent us from removing these chain rings? That's right, these are actually riveted directly onto the crank arm. This presents a bit of a challenge if we want to clean things up. We've got a couple of options here, neither of which are ideal for a super clean single speed build. You could leave the extra chain rings on. They'll just be added weight and won't do anything, but they'll still be there. Alternatively, we could use power tools and you could carefully grind or drill out the rivets to remove the unwanted rings. However, this can be risky and you need to be extremely precise to avoid damaging the rings or cranksets. Now, if you're looking for a better solution, and one that I highly recommend for a cleaner and potentially more efficient setup, you've got a couple of upgrades you can consider. Option 1, a standard crankset with bolt-on chain rings. This is much more straightforward. You simply use an Allen key to remove the bolts and take off the unwanted chain rings. However, for the absolute cleanest look and often optimized chainline for single speed, my personal preference is a single speed specific crankset. These come with a single speed chain ring already installed, and they eliminate the clutter of extra chain ring mounts and are often designed with a chain line that's ideal for single speed riding. For this build, I'm going to swap out the original riveted crankset for this single speed specific one. It's going to give us the cleanest look and the best possible chain line. So, if you're facing the riveted chain ring dilemma, consider upgrading your crankset. It's a worthwhile investment for a polished single speed conversion. Now, the process of removing and installing a crankset can vary depending on the type you have. You might need a crank puller for older square taper cranks like mine. Make sure you consult your bike's manufacturer or online resources if you're unsure how to do this safely and correctly. And of course, if you're not comfortable with this step, your local bike shop can always lend a hand. Now for the heart of the conversion, the single speed setup in the rear. This is a single speed conversion kit I bought years ago. It consists of a single speed cog and these spacers. You'll want to experiment with different configurations to get that chain line as straight as possible. This means trying to align your rear cog with your chain ring so the chain will be as straight as possible. A straight chain line means less wear and tear and a more efficient ride. If you find that your wheel has a free wheel instead of a cassette and free body hub, don't despair. You can remove your multi-speed freewheel like this, and replace it with a single-speed freewheel. Keep in mind, this may not provide the optimal chain line. For this conversion, I'll be using the wheel with the free hub body. Alright, we've got our shiny new single-speed specific crankset ready to go. Now it's time to get the chain and see how everything lines up. Uh-oh, looks like we've hit a snag. As you can see here, the chain I'm planning to use a standard 3/32 chain, which is common for geared bikes and many single-speed setups, isn't quite playing nicely with the teeth on the single-speed specific chainring. This type of chainring is designed for a wider 1/8 inch chain, which is often used on more robust single-speed or BMX bikes. Now, I could go out and get a 1/8 inch chain, and that would certainly solve the immediate fitment issue. However, I already have this 3/32 chain that I was planning to use for this conversion. So, here's what our next steps are. Remember the trusty crankset with the bolt-on chain rings we looked at earlier? Well, this gives us some flexibility. I'll remove 2 of the chain rings and install this. This will allow me to use the 3/32 inch chain I have on hand. There we go, problem solved. By using one of the chain rings on the original crankset, I can ensure perfect compatibility with my 3/32 inch chain. Now, when going single speed, chain tension is the key. You've got a couple of options here. First, we've got these pre-purposed built chain tensioners readily available online. Or, if you're feeling resourceful, you can repurpose a rear derailleur, like this one. We'll dive into the details of both methods later in this video, so stick around. Alright, let's see how to use that old derailleur. First, we'll mount it back on the rear hanger. Now, this is where the limit screws come in handy. We're gonna adjust the high gear limit screw to align the jockey wheels perfectly with our single speed cog. Next, we'll route our chain. Since we're reusing the original, it should be the right length. Now, the moment of truth. Let's give the crank a spin and watch that chain. Perfect. No drops. Nice and smooth. That's a properly tensioned single speed setup. Alright, we're almost ready to hit the road. First up, pedals. Gotta have those. Next, I grabbed some cantilever brake levers from the parts bin. The old brake levers were attached to the shifters. Luckily, I saved those old cables and cable housings from the original shifters and brake levers. I can repurpose those now. Let's get these brakes dialed in. Nice and responsive. Safety first. And lastly, I installed some grips. Now we're ready for our test ride. And now for the moment of truth, the test ride. I'll admit, I was a little worried that this gearing might be a little too easy. But, wow, this is actually a really nice, easy-paced ride. Definitely not winning any races, but perfect for cruising. And, most importantly, the chain is holding strong, no drops. Alright, time to swap out the derailleur setup and try our purpose-built chain tensioner. First, we'll remove the old derailleur and chain. Now, let's get this tensioner mounted. And, for this setup, we're using a brand new chain, cut to the shortest length possible, but still fitting. You can see how this tensioner really holds the chain nice and snug. keeping it perfectly in place. Let's give it a spin. Smooth as butter. And now, the final test ride with our purpose-built tensioner. Let's see how it performs. And just as smooth as before. Same nice, easy gear ratio and absolutely no chain drops. Honestly, I think I prefer the look of this setup. It's definitely a cleaner, more streamlined look. A successful single-speed conversion, either way you tension it. If you enjoyed this video, show the thumbs up button some love, and don't forget to subscribe for more bicycle restoration content.